Hey there, fellow truth seeker. You requested a deep dive on Taoism, and well, get ready to maybe rethink what you thought you knew.
Oh, really? What kind of rethinking are we talking about?
Today we're busting myths, and we're going deep on Taoism. Some serious misconceptions floating around out there.
Yeah, it's more common than you'd think. People get tripped up all the time.
To help us on this journey of myth busting, we're turning to someone who knows their stuff scholar, Louis Komjathy.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that name.
He's got this awesome document all about Taoism misconceptions. It's really eye-opening, honestly.
Let's hear it then. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, like, have you ever heard someone say, "Oh, Taoism, that's a philosophy, not a religion"?
Yeah, totally. Or they're like, is it philosophical Taoism or religious Taoism? Drives me nuts.
Right, like which one is it? Pick a lane, Taoism.
And that's a big misconception right there. That whole divide is like a Western thing, not really how it's been understood historically.
So you're saying it's not about separating the two?
Nope. Not at all. Taoism, from its very beginnings, way back in the Warring States period, we're talking around 480 to 222 BCE, it's always been about lived practice, community, rituals, traditions, that whole shebang.
It's not just like wisdom on a mountaintop.
Haha, no. Though I get why people think that,
Yeah.
but it's so much more than just wise sayings, right?
It's a tapestry, right? That's what you said earlier, like a vibrant tapestry.
Exactly. Okay, so we busted that myth. What about key figures? Everyone's heard of Laozi, but was
Yeah.
he even real?
Oh man, Laozi. I always picture him just chilling with that ox, riding off into the sunset.
Uh-huh. Yeah, classic image. But Laozi is kind of more like shrouded in mystery,
Yeah.
more legend than a historical figure, maybe even a bunch of different teachers all rolled into one.
So more like King Arthur than like a specific dude we can put a date on.
Exactly. And that brings us to another misconception and another really important text, the Daodejing, often attributed to Laozi, by the way.
Oh yeah, I've seen those. Coffee table classic, right?
Right. But even that book, it's not as straightforward as it seems.
Wait, really? What else is there? It's a book, right?
It's not like Laozi just sat down one day and bam, wrote the Taoist Bible. It's a compilation. Writings from all different sources, different periods probably,
Yeah.
offering all these different interpretations.
So it's more like ancient wisdom that's been collected and passed down, like evolving over time.
Exactly. Speaking of collections, have you heard of the Daodejing?
Can't say that I have.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. The Daodejing, it's basically the Taoist canon. We're talking over 1,400 texts.
1,400, you're kidding.
Imagine a library, bigger than you can imagine, filled with all things Taoism, scriptures, commentaries, practices, you name it. And here's the thing. Different Taoist groups, they might emphasize different texts within that library.
Yeah.
There's no one right way to do Taoism.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
Definitely not. And that leads to a whole other bunch of misconceptions, especially when it comes to Taoist practices. But before we get into that, let's take a quick break.
Okay, so Taoist practices. Where do the misconceptions start?
Oh, man. Get ready for a laundry list. We've got correlative cosmology, Chinese medicine, Feng Shui, Qigong.
Okay, whoa. Hold up a sec. It's like you take anything even remotely Eastern and boom, instant Taoism.
You're catching on. And that's a huge part of the problem. These practices, while cool in their own right, they come from a much broader, like, Chinese cultural context. They're not automatically Taoist just because they originated somewhere in Asia.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's break down a few, just so we're clear. Starting with correlative cosmology.
So that's a mouthful. Basically, it's about seeing the interconnectedness of everything. Yin and yang, the five elements, that kind of stuff.
Right. Like, those are definitely things I've heard of before. But those aren't exclusively Taoist.
Nope. It's like how someone can talk about gravity without being a Newtonian physicist. Newton described gravity, but it's, a fundamental force. It'd be silly to say only physicists can talk about it.
I'm with you. Taoists didn't invent gravity, but they're cool with it.
Exactly. They incorporated, but they didn't invent those concepts. And this actually leads us to another big misconception, Chinese medicine.
Oh, really? I thought for sure that'd be a direct link.
There's definitely a connection. Some super influential Taoist figures have contributed to the history of Chinese medicine over the centuries. But what we usually call traditional Chinese medicine, that whole TCM thing, it's actually pretty modern.
You're kidding. So what I think of is this, like, ancient, old school practice. It's not that old.
Komjathy actually points out that what we know as TCM today was mainly shaped and organized by the Chinese government in the 20th century.
Wow. Okay, that's wild. So while we're clearing the air, what about martial arts? Because I always picture those like epic movie scenes on Mount Wudang, all those misty mountains. That screams Taoist, right?
Another misconception. While some Taoists practice martial arts, those epic mountaintop scenes are more like Hollywood magic than historical reality. Like take Tai Chi, for instance.
Oh, yeah. Tai Chi is super chill, flowy movements. That's got to be Daoist.
It's a martial art, but it's not inherently Taoist, though I'll grant you some aspects are definitely influenced by Taoist thought. And that whole idea that it started at Mount Wudang, yeah, another misconception.
Wow. Okay, so much for stereotypes. What about Taoist yoga? Heard that one thrown around too. That's got to be off base.
100%. That's what happens when you take bits and pieces of different traditions and blend them together without really understanding the bigger picture.
So more like a cultural fusion thing than an authentic historical practice.
Exactly. Yoga has its roots in ancient Indian traditions and philosophies. Totally different ballgame. Sure, there might be some surface level stuff that looks similar breathwork or certain poses, but to call it Taoist yoga, just inaccurate.
Right. It's like calling a burrito a Zen taco just because it's got beans and tortillas.
Exactly. It just emphasizes how important it is to actually understand these traditions before we start slapping labels on them.
Totally agree. And speaking of labels, how about those translations of the Daodejing? I mean, you've got Stephen Mitchell, Ursula Le Guin, all these different versions. I always just assumed those were accurate representations.
See, and that's where things get really interesting, because those popular translations, as well written as they are, they're more like interpretations.
So there's a cultural disconnect that's hard to avoid.
Exactly. They're trying to make it relatable. But often that means stripping away the religious and cultural context that gives the Daojing its true depth. They might have some good insights, don't get me wrong, but it's crucial to remember those are interpretations, not the be-all and end-all of Taoism.
It really makes you realize how easily these misconceptions take root. We think we're getting the real deal, but it's more like,
A funhouse mere reflection.
yeah, some parts might look familiar, but the whole picture's distorted.
And all this oversimplification, it leads to what Komjathy calls popular Western Taoism.
Okay, so popular Western Taoism, catchy name.
Catchy, but also kind of a mouthful. That's why he shortens it to PWT.
PWT, got it. But what is it, really? Like, what's the heart of it?
It's this tendency, and it's everywhere, to take aspects of Taoism, like little pieces here and there, and strip away all the cultural and historical stuff that gives it depth.
Yeah.
And then they repackage it for a Western audience that wants, like, the easy version. Quick fixes, simple answers.
So like all those Tao of books, the Tao of Pooh, the Tao of leadership.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, some of them are fun reads,
Yeah.
and they might have a nugget of wisdom here and there, but often it's a very surface-level understanding of Taoism. And sometimes, to be honest, it's just inaccurate.
What about those self-help books? The ones that are all about unleash the wisdom of the Tao and change your thoughts, change your life. PWT, right.
100%. Positive thinking is great and all, but Taoism is about way more than that. You can't just boil it down to these little self-improvement formulas. It's like trying to fit, like, I don't know, the entire ocean in a teacup.
You get a taste, but it's not the real deal.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive here, what's the main thing you're hoping our listener walks away with today?
Ooh, the main takeaway. It's that Taoism is, well, it's complicated. More complex than I ever realized. It's not just about, like, going with the flow or chilling on a mountaintop.
And that's the beauty of it. It's a living tradition, rich history, its own philosophies, specific practices, different lineages. It's been evolving for centuries, and it's still evolving today.
It's definitely made me want to learn more. Any advice for our listeners who are feeling the same?
Approach Taoism, or really any tradition, with curiosity.
Yeah.
Don't just accept everything you hear. Ask questions. Be open to being challenged. The journey of understanding, it's more rewarding than just, like, having all the answers.
Love that. Well, thanks for joining us on this myth-busting adventure. It was definitely eye-opening. And to you, dear listener, keep those deep dive requests coming. Until next time, happy learning.